Republicans are scrambling to stop their base from realizing just how devastating their cuts to federal spending will actually be. But gradually and slowly, the other shoe is beginning to drop.
We're here today to tame the labyrinth of the federal bureaucracy. That's why I was elected, and frankly, that's why President Trump was reelected this past November. More responsible government spending means less need for taxation on the American people. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have claimed cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse will include cuts to Social Security and Medicare. However, promoting efficiency and cutting wasteful spending actually protects Social Security and Medicare by ensuring available and continued funding. And if they have any more doubts, I would invite them to sign on to my Lasso Act that actually puts these decisions out of the public harm and into the public's domain. When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, now X, in 2022, he fired about 6,000 employees, or nearly 80% of his workforce. But there was no lapses in X's management. Well, perhaps only less community notes and less removal of unlawful lawful political speech. Elon Musk trimmed the fat on X, and we have the opportunity to do the same here in Washington.
I'd like to enter for the record, please, a letter from the Associated Builders and Contractors of America regarding merit-based hiring, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My brothers and sisters across the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, we have a historical trend in our nation. We have an opportunity to address legitimately from both liberal and conservative perspectives. I think it should be embraced because, generally speaking, we started losing our country about 40 years ago regarding the accelerated accumulation of debt. And this coincides, of course, with the massive growth of the federal government. And this coincides, of course, with the ongoing increasing infringement upon individual liberties, rights, and freedoms, and movement away from the sovereignty of our states regarding their ability to handle their business, reflective of the 10th Amendment, might I add, which reserves to the states all authorities not specifically enumerated to the federal government or prohibited to the states by Congress or the Constitution. So, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, President Clinton, when you have a unified government, when you have either party in majority control in the House, the Senate, and the White House, that's opportunity to really address the trajectory that we're on in our country. President Clinton wasn't going to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. President Bush wasn't going to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. President Obama wasn't going to do that. You have a unique moment in history right now. We have an obligation to address the trajectory that has been established over the last 4 decades. This is a trajectory towards doom for our country. It's unsustainable. So we have an executive branch that's pumping the brakes. And this is something that this town is very uncomfortable with, and quite frankly, it's new territory. It's a new exercise for our country in modern history. So there's going to be maybe some wild steering, shall we say, when you're applying the brakes for the first time in modern history. But I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to grasp what's going on here. We're trying to save our republic from itself. Governor Reynolds, I would like to ask you about your role, your beautiful work, reducing your own executive branch from 37 cabinet-level departments to 16. It's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to do. You saved your state a lot of money. You changed your trajectory of spending. You reestablished financial stability and economic prosperity because of your conservative approach. It's what we're trying to do. And the President Trump and Mr. Musk is as an ambassador of common sense for President Trump to look hard at the practices of our executive branches and to reduce their size and scope. Governor Reynolds, I have a formula essentially that transitions federal service back to the sovereign states. We can save a lot of money doing this. What are your thoughts on shifting federal responsibilities away from the massive federal government to the sovereign states? Generally speaking, agencies like EPA, FEMA, Bureau of Prisons, how would that work in your state, ma'am?
Well, we would welcome that, again, and especially with the alignment, I think we're positioned very well to do that. So I appreciate what I see happening with DOGE. As I indicated in my remarks, I'm standing up Iowa DOGE so we can continue to bring the private sector in to examine the way that we're doing business. Government has to operate more like a business. It had been 40 years since we even looked at the structure of government in Iowa. It was ripe for reform. You know, they never eliminate a program. They never do away with one. Once it started, it stays. If it's not working, they think more money is the answer to it, so we keep it. If it doesn't work, there's really no metrics ever tied to anything, but the ongoing thought is if we put a little bit more money into it, eventually it's going to work. So I believe that states are well suited to implement block grants with accountability, with transparency, with metrics, with KPIs, so that we can report back to the federal government the results that we're seeing from the opportunity to take those streamlined dollars and be innovative and be effective, whether it's the Department of Education, FEMA. I had 3 presidential disaster declarations in 2 months this last spring.
Thank you. My time has expired, Governor. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
For the hour, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and his enablers advance their extremist, anti-equity, un-American agenda, dismantling decades of civil rights progress, upending livelihoods, incomes, and lives, and adversely affecting something they claim to care about, the GDP. Because all data supports that diversity, equity, and inclusion is actually good business. Governor Reynolds, my Republican colleagues invited you here today to promote what they see as a model of governance. Simply put, Republicans' vision of America is to be more like Iowa. Governor Reynolds, let's learn more about the state. Do you know what percentage of Iowans are white and what percentage are black?
I don't know the exact percentages, no. We're by far a larger percentage of white population.
That's correct. Iowa is 90% white and only 4.5% black. So that is drastically different from the national population. So when Republicans suggest Iowa should be a national model, they're advocating for a government that doesn't reflect our country. So let's talk about what this model of governance actually means in practice. In Iowa, you signed State Senate Bill 2385 to eliminate more than 80 state boards and commissions, including those representing Black Iowans, Latinos, women, people with disabilities, and Asian, Pacific Islanders, communities that are marginalized and vulnerable and have fought for decades to have a seat at the table. Now, Republicans call this fiscal responsibility. I just call it erasure. Governor Reynolds, the Iowa Legislative Services Agency conducted a nonpartisan analysis of that bill. Do you know how much money was saved when you eliminated those commissions?
Actually, it was not about saving money. It was about putting more resources behind the Department of Human Rights so that we could actually provide them more resources for minority communities.
Reclaiming my time. Let me help you with the math. Roughly $112,000 in your state budget was saved. So that is 0.001%, barely a rounding error. So honestly, given your current salary, Iowans would have saved more money just by eliminating your salary. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter the LSA fiscal note into the record.
Without objection, it's ordered.
In addition to cutting boards and commissions, Iowa started closing government agencies. Now, this is the same thing that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are trying to do at the national level. Now, Governor Reynolds, let's be clear. I have no problem with Iowans but I do with your leadership. So let's look at the results, shall we? In Iowa, there have been skyrocketing maternal mortality rates. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article titled, "Iowa's Maternal Death Rates Rise as Birthing Units Close."
Without objection, so ordered.
In Iowa, students' test scores have been declining. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article titled, "Iowa Scores in 50 State Education Rankings Declined from Years Past."
Without objection, so ordered.
In Iowa, more kids are going hungry. Is this the kind of government efficiency y'all are talking about? Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article titled, "Iowa's Food Pantries Hit Record High Numbers This Summer."
Without objection, so ordered.
So let's be clear about what Republicans are actually doing. You are making people poorer. You are making people hungrier, more vulnerable, and gutting their civil rights. These attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they were never about efficiency. They certainly were never about merit. It's just a deliberate, calculated attempt to erase marginalized communities from government while eliminating essential services for workers, families, and the people that we are actually elected to protect. They want a country for and by millionaires that advances white supremacy, and that is the real agenda. And I will do everything I can to speak truth to power and to stand in the way of that. I yield back.
These hearings are infuriating. The game is so obvious, and it's also nothing new. Republicans have always been keen to sell public services and give tax cuts to the rich. That's kind of their thing historically. But what's different now is that they don't seem to have any qualms about openly breaking the law or utterly ignoring the Constitution to achieve those aims. Dozens of lawsuits have already been filed to block Trump's executive orders, and so far he's lost the vast majority that have actually been adjudicated, even by judges that he put on the bench. Now, the courts are doing their job, but the real danger comes if Trump decides to ignore them, or if the Supreme Court decides that they're just going to put a rubber stamp on all of his worst excesses. There's a danger, absolutely. But they have ruled against Trump before, so there's a chance. And it's vital that these cases are publicized and that we celebrate the victories and fight the losses. We have to do both of those things, not just to show that he can be stopped, but to give us some hope in what is already an exhausting and existentially terrifying time to be in America.